Today, we're talking about a concept that many of us crave, yet rarely truly receive. That lingering ache after a relationship ends, a friendship fades, or when someone just simply walks out of our lives. We often find ourselves searching for that final conversation, that perfect explanation, or perhaps even an apology, or something to tie a neat bow around the whole experience. I'm talking about closure. And it feels sometimes like we need it to move on, like without it, true healing just isn't possible. But today we're challenging that idea because the truth is, healing isn't contingent on an apology that may never come or an explanation you might not receive. It's an inner process, a journey of self acceptance and compassion that you can absolutely take on all by yourself. So, why do we do this? Well, from childhood, we're fed a narrative. Every story has a neat ending, every conflict gets resolved, and life always moves forward in a very clean way. Sometimes societal myths can reinforce this, subtly telling us that true healing is only possible through a final conversation or some raw, deep explanation. Maybe in our younger years, breakups or disagreements were often handled with a clear conversation, and it trained us to think that this was a fundamental requirement for our future self. But as we step into adulting, we learn that not everyone has the emotional maturity or willingness to engage in these types of conversations. And suddenly, we're left feeling lost, alone, and confused about why something ended without understanding the other person's perspective. We often convince ourselves that if we only could explain our side, we feel better, we could truly move on, and they would understand us and our actions. We believe it allows us to make sense of everything, and it can fill in the blanks and release that emotional energy we have pent up. But the reality is that perfect conversation, it sometimes just never arrives. And this belief that closure is required can trap you in a place where you think without it, you can't move forward. And it stops us from starting the work that actually needs to be done. What does moving on without closure versus with closure look like? So let's first think about the ideal scenario, moving on with closure. This is where the situation ends or the relationship fades, and you're able to process it in a very healthy way with the other person. You each share your perspective, perhaps gain a mutual understanding, or at least come to a respectful agreement to part ways. While perfect harmony is not achieved, you feel genuinely heard, your emotional needs are acknowledged, and you can proceed with some type of peace walking away from that situation. But what about when that ideal situation never shows up? And this is common, and sometimes it's a painful reality for some of us. Some things, they just end, and maybe this is at the decision of someone else or some external circumstance that's beyond our control. And maybe the other person is incapable of expressing themselves, or they're too hurt to engage. There might be a genuine risk of unproductive arguments that lead to abuse, or perhaps they simply lack the emotional aptitude or intelligence to navigate such a discussion. In these often frustrating situations, the vital shift is recognizing that your healing journey is now yours to own. Closure isn't guaranteed, and when it's unavailable, we often have to look inward. This means honestly reflecting on our own contributions to the situation and cultivating acceptance for what really happened, and then building a path forward that centers on our well-being. Focusing on getting that external resolution can easily become a mental roadblock to our healing. Instead, it's the consistent, courageous internal work that truly empowers you to heal and build that long-lasting peace. If you watch this channel, you know I always like to tell a story to let you know that I lived it. And I want to talk about something that really brought this concept home for me. I was in a relationship that had all the makings of something special. And we had been dating for several months. And there was a lot of love between us and a lot of connection and chemistry. And we had talked about a future together. And we had collectively agreed that we were both contributing to something meaningful. And from my perspective, there was no fundamental problems with our connection or with the relationship. But my girlfriend at the time was battling some personal issues and some financial issues. And because of these struggles, she wasn't able to show up as the person that I had initially fell for. And I offered support in many ways that I knew how. but she just wasn't willing to accept any, nor could she process what she was going through in a really healthy way. And slowly, as she vacillated between her own mental challenges, she started treating our relationship differently. And despite nothing having changed in that relationship since day one, other than her perception of it due to her own situation. So, after about 2 months of trying to support her and going through all these things and seeing no change, I just grew tired of watching an adult act like that. And I ended up deciding I needed to make the difficult decision to protect myself and take care of myself. And so I decided to end things. Now, I'll be honest, that breakup was not easy. It was challenging for both of us. And the ending came in a moment of frustration. And while the content was relevant, maybe the packaging could have been more graceful. And I genuinely expected that she'd take my feedback to heart and that we'd eventually talk again and perhaps reach some sort of understanding. But that conversation, it never happened. And for weeks, I obsessed about writing the perfect letter, sending the perfect email, writing the perfect text. And I thought if I just found the exact right words, I could explain myself and clarify why I did what I did. And I could finally get this feelings out of me and I could move forward. But then it hit me. Closure wasn't owed to me. And this person, for whatever reason, whether it was lack of mental fortitude, desire, or capacity, simply couldn't hold space for that conversation with me. I did the only thing I could do. I looked in the mirror and I asked myself, what's my part in this situation? How did I get here? And I reflected deeply on my actions. And I continued to dive into the relationship dynamic with my therapist. And I did a ton of self-work and a lot of spiritual work. And many months later, I genuinely felt no need for that external closure. I had reached a point of 100% acceptance and my understanding that this simply wasn't the relationship or the person I thought it was. And looking back, I could finally see so many red flags that I had chosen to dismiss along the way. So, to close things out on the topic of closure, not every story gets a final chapter. Not every goodbye is even spoken, heard, or sometimes acknowledged. And often, true healing doesn't start when we finally get the answers. It starts when we stop looking back, when we start looking forward. And when we stop waiting for someone else to tell us it's okay, and we instead decide to show up for our own self. And we might believe that we're missing closure, but in reality, what we're all searching for is peace. And here's the thing, that peace, it will never come from someone else's words or their approval or their explanation. It can only come from within and from the moment that you choose to accept what happened, honor your own growth, and you start walking forward. So, guys, I'll stop there on this one. As always, if something hit, share it with someone else. And remember, life is better when we stop pretending, when we start talking. Catch you next time.